Namaste, namaste, and welcome to this short yoga practice. Today we're going to look at Vinyasa. So in yoga, the term Vinyasa really means the coordination of breath and movement together, like the marriage of breath and movement. And we see it in flowing styles like Ashtanga and Vinyasa styles. But when we talk about the Vinyasa, often it's used to mean the part of a sequence where we go from plank down to the floor to a back bend like cobra or up dog and then to down dog. And so today we're going to look at different ways of doing that that you can add to your practice, because some of us are comfortable doing chaturangas and up dogs and rolling over feet, and some of us just need something to get us there without providing quite the strength challenge that chaturanga offers. So we'll do some different variations. So come and join me on your mat, and we will start from our hands and knees. So we're going to place the hands onto the floor, and how you place your hands really affects how strong your arms and shoulders and how they work together. So having your fingers nicely spread, not forcing, but just lengthening, expanding the base that you're balancing on, and making sure that your weight will mostly be in the heels of your hands. It has to be because of the structure of the arm and strength up through the arm, but we want to have some awareness into the fingertips so that we can balance out and provide a little bit of centered strength for the hands. Knees underneath hips, and we're going to begin by pressing the tops of the feet down, firming the body so that we lift away from the mat, and then doing some cat-cow moves. So soft in the elbows, a little gentle length of the front body, opening the chest, gliding the shoulder blades down, and then rounding through your spine, scooping your belly in and chin to chest. As you come forward, you might like to inhale, maybe roll the shoulder blades down the back, scoop the belly in as you look forward, and then rounding through the back of the body, tucking the tailbone in, shoulders towards hips, chin towards chest, scooping the belly further in. Inhaling forward. And exhaling, rounding. One more like this. Inhaling forward. And exhaling, rounding. And then just taking a few moments off your wrists, give them a little shake out if you want to, a little roll, anything that helps, because we're going to use them quite a lot during today's practice. So we'll see how it goes. So the first option we have is some disciplines actually do down dog and then to plank to come down to the floor, but we're going to practice from plank. So the first thing we have to do is come into a plank, and on this first round, this first variation, we're going to do a standard plank and take the knees down to come to the floor. So we want the hands back where we had them. We're going to tuck the toes under and just walk your feet slightly away from you so you've got a little bit more length in your plank, pressing the chest away from the floor, scooping the belly in, a little tuck under of the tailbone perhaps, and extending through the legs if that feels like it's good for you. And here we don't want to drop the head or lift the chin. We want to keep the head nicely in line. From plank, we take the knees to the mat, and we've got quite a lot of space between the knees and the hands. We're going to take the hips back gently, and then allow the chest to come towards the floor by bending the elbows so that we end up gliding into a cobra position. All you have to do here is point your toes, roll your shoulder blades towards each other to lift into cobra touch, firming the belly and the buttocks. And then to come back, we come down to the mat, tuck the toes under, come back to our hands and knees, and then into downward facing dog. Walking the feet perhaps a little closer in, giving yourself a little wiggle in your down dog. If this is your first down dog of the day, we can give it a little paddle, one heel towards the mat, softening the opposite knee, maybe looking under one shoulder and then the other, making sure those fingertips are working. And then when you're ready, you can rest your knees to the mat and come into an upright position so that we can start again. So we're going to do this one more time through, this knees down and swinging the chest forward, which is a really nice variation if you find it a little bit. So we can't assume strength in our bodies if we don't practice those movements in our real life. So if you're a yoga teacher and you're going up and down to the mat all of the time, then that's fine. But if you don't do a lot of pressing of your upper body, then your upper body strength will take a little while to develop to the point where you feel comfortable doing that. So any variation that works for you that allows you to come down to the mat, developing that little bit of strength is great. And these stabilizing moves, these strengthening moves where we are in a lifted position and we come towards the floor, help us to develop that strength more gently than if we try to press ourselves away from the floor. So it's good in many ways. We're going to come back to our hands and knees and then step our plank into our plank pose. Feet can be nice and wide if it suits you. Just getting a really nice established plank. It doesn't matter if your hips are a little bit high here, but try not to let them come too low or to sag into your shoulders because it just isn't strong for the body. It means that the spine is compressed in ways it doesn't enjoy over time. So here we're taking the knees down to the mat, but the knees are staying quite far back. We're going to take our hips slightly back so that we can swing the chest forward as we bend the elbows and come into plank pose. We don't even have to take the head down. We're already looking a little bit forward. All we have to do is point the toes, roll the shoulder blades towards each other, maybe press into the hands a little, firming the belly and the buttocks, taking care not to lead with the chin or let the shoulders creep up. And then from here, we can come down slightly. It's always good to touch the forehead to the floor if you get the opportunity, and then back to hands and knees, and then to your downward facing dog. And in downward dog, again, particularly if it's your first few dogs of the day, keeping a little gentle undulation through the body. And then when you're ready, you can take a child's pose, perhaps knees wide, toes together. Give yourself the opportunity of just resting the forehead onto the backs of the arms or the floor, resting the palms upwards if it helps to release sensation in the palms of the hands or the wrists. Take a couple of deep breaths. We're not here to do a massive workout. We're just trying to find the best solution to Vinyasa for you. Walking your hands back towards you when you're ready. So this I really like for students who are really new to sun salutation practice and who perhaps are coming to doing these practices without a lot of upper body strength. The other thing that you can do, which is really, really, really simple, is to simply do a cat pose. So if that one felt like it's still just a touch too far for you, when you come into your plank pose, you can instead bring the knees to the mat and do a simple cat and then cow, or cow and then cat, and then from there go into your downward facing dog. So let's do that once together. We'll start from plank pose, take the knees to the mat, and then here, gentle lifted cat, we'll call it, and then rounding under, scooping the belly in and tucking the tailbone, lengthening the legs as you take the heels towards the mat in your downward dog. And then releasing back, knees down, sitting in any comfortable position. So that I think I should have done first. Apologies for those who missed out on that one. But if that is where you're starting, do that for a little while. It's also the way that pregnant ladies do sun salutations, so they don't have to come down to the mat. So really valid. All you're looking for in the vinyasa is an opportunity to do an opening back bend, a front opening back bend, and then going in the opposite direction from a position of strength. So we've done A and B the wrong way around, but it's fine. We'll move on to option C. So here, this is what I do most often. We've come from plank pose, and we're going to take knees, chest, and forehead or chin to the floor. So both knees down, and then we want to draw the shoulder blades towards each other and lift the tailbone at the same time to draw the chest between the hands if possible, either chin or forehead to the floor. And then relax the feet so that the body is flat and the hips are down. We're going to roll the shoulder blades towards each other, gently lift the upper back and chest away from the floor. And then from here, you can come back through hands and knees if you'd like to. You can even drop your tailbone towards your heels in a little puppy dog pose before you come into downward facing dog. So let's do that from our down dog. We'll come forward into plank again. So forward into plank. This pose we're going into knees, chest, forehead. It's actually called Ashtanga, the 8-limb stick. So you've got 2 hands, 2 feet on the floor. When you drop your knees, you've got 2 knees on the floor. That's 6. And then when you drop your chest and either chin or forehead, you've got 2 more points on the floor, 8-limb stick. And this is a pose in its own right, and it is practiced to prepare for some of our other postures. When you get into that pose, you can then relax the hips down, point your toes, firm your belly and buttocks, come into cobra, whatever version of cobra works for you, doesn't matter how high it is. And then if you want to, through hands and knees into downward facing dog. Give yourself a little moment in your down dog, and then resting in child's pose or resting on your knees or any shape that feels good, shaking out the wrists if you need to. So we're going to do this 2 more times together. And the reason why we're focusing a little bit more on this is because I think it's one of the best vinyasas out there, because you don't need a huge amount of upper body strength, but actually if you practice it properly, it helps you to develop a really strong upper body, a strong core, and it is attainable for most people, where chaturanga perhaps is a little bit hard on the wrists and hard on the upper body, and people injure themselves if they're not doing it properly, which is, people injure themselves doing anything if they're not doing it properly, not just yoga. So let us come into our plank and do that 2 more times through. And this time, if you want to lift from cobra back into downward dog without going through your knees, you can do that. That's what I'm going to do. So this is like C version 2. So we're coming into plank pose, and then looking slightly ahead of your mat, knees come down. We're gently going to burlesque the bottom. So stick your bottom out a little, firm your belly, draw your shoulder blades towards each other so that you draw your chest towards the mat. And when you get there, chin, chest, 2 hands, 2 knees, 2 feet, that's all that's on the floor. Then you point your toes, the hips come down, you can roll your shoulder blades towards each other, open into your cobra pose, and from cobra, you can either take hands and knees or tuck the toes under, lift the tailbone up, hips up, heels down into downward facing dog. Give yourself a moment in your down dog, wiggle, 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 anything that needs wiggling. And then from here, little buoyancy in the knees to come forward into plank again. Nice plank to begin with, and then knees come down. Gentle lift of the tailbone to engage the belly. Draw the shoulder blades towards each other as you bend the elbows. Take the forehead or chin to the floor. Make sure you hit 8-limb stick. You've got just 8 pieces of your body on the floor, and then pointing your toes, rolling your shoulder blades towards each other, finding cobra pose. Nice and soft in the elbows. Elbows quite close to the body. If you can, tuck the toes under, hips up, heels down, downward facing dog. Step your feet a little closer in if it feels good. Give yourself a little wiggle. And when you're ready, you can find a child's pose just to take a moment to soften down to the mat. Take a few deep breaths here. And be sure to release the effort that you've made in the body. So softening that space across the shoulders, shoulder blades, the belly, softening the wrists, maybe giving the fingers a little wiggle, maybe giving the toes a little wiggle, maybe wiggling the hips from side to side, whatever you would like to do. When you're ready, you can come back up into an upright position. So that was version C, 1 and 2. And now we're going to do version D, which is a chaturanga. So here we're going, in fact, we're going to add a different one, I think, sorry. So we're going to do a gentle chaturanga, and then we're going to do up dog, but with the legs on the floor instead of lifted. So we're going to do version 1 of D as well. Oh, how exciting. So for this one, we're coming into plank pose. And you can always just watch before you do something, see if it would suit you. For chaturanga, we want to gently press the weight forward so that our shoulders are a little bit forward of our hands. And then bending the elbows so that you slowly lower your body to the floor. But we're going to go all the way down. So normally in chaturanga, you wouldn't go all the way down, but we're going to go all the way down. And then here, rolling the shoulder blades towards each other, we're going to lengthen the arms as much as we can, rolling the shoulder blades to open the chest and maybe balancing on the tops of the toes or the thighs. What we want to avoid is crunching the lower back. So we want to press the pubic bone forward and engage in the belly muscles and the buttocks as well. And then from here, want to come back down to the mat, tuck the toes under. We're trying to press all the way back up into plank pose and then into downward facing dog. Now, it might come through hands and knees to do that if you prefer. So let's do that one more time. This is a really slow controlled lower through the chaturanga type of shape so that we can develop the strength to do a full chaturanga. So looking slightly ahead of your mat in your plank, we're going to shift the weight forward onto the toes and then bend the elbows nice and slowly to lower the body slowly towards the floor. It's really hard to talk and do that at the same time. When you get down, tucking the toes flat, and then we can roll the shoulder blades, lengthen the arms, either balancing on the tops of the feet, firming the buttocks and the belly, or balancing on the tops of the legs, keeping a longer arm here to open the chest. And we want to be looking forward and really opening across that chest. When you're ready, coming back down to the mat. And then we want to press into the arms, find our way back up to plank pose, and then downward facing dog. Giving yourself a moment in your down dog, give a little wiggle, and then find a child's pose. And this child's pose, I'm going to keep my knees together and reach my arms back to really rest my wrists and shoulders for that matter. A few deeper breaths here. Wiggle anything that might need wiggling. And when you're ready, you can come to upright position. I'm just going to release my wrists a little bit more as well. This is not my first video of the day, and unfortunately, all of them have had a lot of wrist action. So my wrists are definitely feeling the effort. But that's okay, as long as it dissipates after practice, it's not a problem. And I've been also doing some wrist strengthening exercises outside of yoga, so maybe that is irritating them slightly. Okay, so now that we've done this sort of, I don't want to say soft version, but it's just a slightly gentler version of chaturanga. We're not having to hold ourselves off the floor halfway down and then change into an up dog. So it's just a little bit of a way to develop that strength to come forward and down. But the mistake most people make is that they don't have their weight far enough forward over their hands. There's also some discussion in the yoga world about where the elbows need to be. So I've always been taught to keep the elbows close to my body. So when you're in your plank pose, you're rolling the inner elbows slightly forward so that when you bend your elbows, they bend straight back. Instead of, if your inner elbows are pointed in towards each other, then they will bend out to the side. It also rolls your weight into the outside edge of the hand in a way that can be a little bit uncomfortable. But having the elbows close in is something that develops over time. The strength required for that develops over time. So if your elbows come out a little bit, but you're aiming to bring them in, then that's fine. You just go with it. Do what suits your body in this moment. If chaturanga is super challenging, you feel yourself very, very, very shaky, I recommend you step away from this variation and practice the other variations until you feel more confident. Okay, so our final variation, like a full chaturanga, if you like, we're going to come into plank pose. And then here we're looking ahead of the mat, shifting the weight forward. We bend the elbows only halfway, and then we rock over to the tops of the feet and open into up dog. Firm in the buttocks, opening across the chest, looking up nice and long in the arms, and then we scoop the belly in and up to come into downward facing dog. Give yourself a moment in downward dog, maybe wriggle things that need wriggling. Deep breath in and out. And then we'll do that again. I might move my feet slightly further back, but sometimes you end up in just the right space when you do this variation. Looking ahead of the mat, transferring your weight forward, bending at the elbows, and then rocking over the feet to open the front of the body, scooping the belly in, firm in the buttocks, and then bending yourself the opposite way, hips up, heels down, into downward facing dog. Give yourself a few moments in your down dog before finding your child's pose. Maybe taking a different variation. I've got wide knees this time, turning the palms upwards. You can even do a twisted child's pose if you like. You can lie flat on your belly if that's what suits you better, or you can be upright if that suits you. Nice deep breaths. And when you're ready, coming up into kneeling. So this variation of chaturanga, up dog, down dog, I don't practice very often. And the reason for that is because I prefer what's called a waving vinyasa. So that's the final variation that I'm going to teach. I can't remember if I said the last one. Anyway, variation E is the final variation. This is something I learned from a yoga teacher called Julie Martin, who's very, very good. I recommend you follow her online. And she offers this as an alternative to the very sort of chunky, clunky plank chaturanga, up dog, down dog, which looks beautiful when somebody very practiced and strong does it gracefully. But most people doing yoga in your average class are not strong enough to do it that way. So, and also some classes have an awful lot of vinyasas in them. So this is a variation that really moves the body in an incredibly graceful way, really promotes strength, mobility, and stability. So those of you familiar with my classes will know this from what we have done. With the first variation we're going to do is variation 1 of variation E, is with the knees down. And we're going to start from our hips being back on our heels and reaching the hands as far forward as feels comfortable and the forehead on the floor. So here we're going to press off the feet, round through the spine, so still looking back towards the knees until the shoulders come over the hands, and then we're going to glide the shoulder blades down the back, open the chest, firm the buttocks, firm the belly, maybe soften the elbows, maybe even look up if it feels comfortable, and then round through the spine, scooping the belly in, pressing through the hands, and taking the hips back towards the heels. So finish with your forehead towards the floor, there or thereabouts, and we'll do 2 more like that, pressing off the feet to round through the spine, scooping the belly in as the shoulders come forward over the hands, opening the chest, gliding the elbows, shoulder blades down, firming the buttocks and the belly, and then rounding through the spine, scooping the belly in, and taking the buttocks back towards the heels. You don't have to have the toes tucked flat, they can be tucked under if you prefer. Rounding through the spine as you come forward, firming the buttocks, gliding the shoulder blades down to open the chest. And really buoyant in the elbows here, you have to use a lot more strength. And then rounding through the spine, coming back into that extended puppy dog pose or child's pose. When you're ready, just bring yourself back to upright. Or take a rest in downward dog, child's pose if you prefer. So this variation doesn't end up in a down dog, but as you come back to your puppy dog pose, you can easily come into down dog if that's what happens next in your sequence. And it's a really lovely way to articulate through the body. And it still requires a significant amount of strength. It's not an easier version. It's what I would say maybe is a healthier version. I like that. I like that. Okay, so the other way to do a waving vinyasa is from downward dog. So we're going to come into downward dog. So the knees are now lifted. This is slightly more challenging. So from downward dog, we're bending the knees to drop the buttocks towards the heels. Knees don't reach the floor. Looking back towards the feet, pressing off the feet to round through the spine. Same shape. As we come forward and the shoulders come over the hands, we draw the shoulder blades towards each other and open the chest. If you wish to, you could take the tops of your feet to the floor. If you prefer, you can stay with the toes tucked under. And then we round through the spine, bending the knees to take the hips back to the heels. To take it's back to downward facing dog. And then we can drop the hips to the heels to do another one like that. So pressing forward to round through the spine. As the shoulders come over the hands, gliding the shoulder blades down to open the chest, maybe taking the tops of the feet to the floor, don't have to. And then to come back the way, bending the knees, rounding through the spine, and coming back to downward dog, and resting for a moment in child's pose. Take a couple of deep breaths. And whenever you're ready, coming to an upright position. So I wasn't concentrating very well on that one, so I did a hybrid of the next variation, but I hope that you understood it from the instructions. So there are 3 variations of this. We have done the first 2, one from the knees down, one from the knees up, but where you bend the knees in both directions, and this one where you come back through plank pose. So from up dog to plank pose to come back. And it's just that slightly more challenging. So we will start from downward facing dog. Nice wide downward facing dog for a waving vinyasa. And then softening the knees to drop the hips towards the heels, pressing through the feet to round through the spine forward, opening the chest, finding your up dog position, and then to come back, pressing up to plank, and then rounding or lifting the tailbone to come into downward facing dog. Softening the knees to drop the buttocks towards the heels. Let's do that one more time. Pressing through the feet to round forward, opening the chest in up dog, nice and firm through the center of the body. And then from here, pressing to plank pose. Press the heels away from you and then lifting into downward facing dog. And so when you're ready, releasing down to the mat, taking child's pose if you like, or any rest, or just resting upright. So if you prefer a standard vinyasa, if you like that, those shapes that you make in a standard vinyasa, perhaps this final variation of a waving vinyasa will suit you. Add it to your practice, see if it feels like the right thing for you. And I hope that you've enjoyed all of these myriad variations that we've looked at today. If you have a variation that we haven't talked about, of course, this is not the definitive list. There are many more variations, and please do feel free to share it. I'd love to see it or hear it from you. And I hope you have a great day. Namaste.